So Eddie Hearn has made a counter offer to Anthony Yarde and Frank Warren to have Yarde fight his guy, Hosea Burton, for 100 grand, which is the exact same amount that Frank Warren has offered Frank Buglioni to fight Anthony Yarde. So they're going tit for tat right now. And Eddie Hearn in an IFL interview addressing the situation did bring up some pretty good points. He said, why is Anthony Yarde willing to fight Ricky Summers for, I don't know what it was, 25 grand or something like that is what Eddie Hearn claimed. He's willing to fight Ricky Summers in September for 25 grand, but he's not willing to fight Hosea Burton for this 100 grand. How does that make sense? And that's a good question. You know, I've said many times, regardless who you think is in the right or in the wrong when it comes to this Anthony Yarde, Frank Buglioni situation, regardless of that, if Buglioni's not going to fight Yarde for whatever reason, because he don't want to give up his British title, because he's been steered away from it by people in his team, whatever the reason is, if that's not going to happen, then Anthony Yarde needs a good plan B. I don't see what the issue is with fighting Hosea Burton as a plan B. That's a very good plan B as far as I'm concerned. Especially after Eddie Hearn has now said he's offering Yarde 100 grand to fight Hosea Burton. How are you going to turn that down and go fight Ricky Summers for a lot less money on Box Nation? That is a legitimate question in terms of the plan B. Yarde had very little experience as an amateur, even though he was successful in the few amateur fights that he had. He's had very little experience so far as a pro. It's understandable that they're moving him slowly and they're picking his fights carefully. They have to. You can't take a guy with such little experience and throw him to the lions. You have to be careful. But the level of opposition that he's been fighting up to this point has been appalling. Appalling. Just to put it in perspective, Eddie Hearn said that Joshua Buatsi in his next fight is going to fight a guy who knocked out Anthony Yarde's last opponent in 3 rounds. Anthony Yarde's had what, 11, 12 fights now? Joshua Buatsi has had 1 fight, and he's already fighting in his second fight somebody way better than Anthony Yarde is fighting in his, fought in his 10th or 11th fight. Just to give you an indication of how awful Yarde's opposition has been. And again, I understand Joshua Buatsi, a vastly more experienced amateur than Anthony Yarde. An Olympian, a guy who's been boxing a hell of a long time. Anthony Yarde, very short amateur career, wasn't a particularly high-level amateur career. Now he's turned pro. So again, I'm just reiterating myself. But still, they're going to need to step Yarde up. Perhaps they're looking at styles. Perhaps they think Frank Buglioni's style is a better style for Anthony Yarde to deal with. He's not as tall as Hosea Burton. Hosea Burton is like 6'4". Very unusual height for a light heavyweight to be that tall. 6'4". Very tall. Frank Buglioni much shorter than that, around the same height as Anthony Yarde himself. Frank Buglioni, a more rudimentary fighter, I think it's fair to say, than Hosea Burton. A come forward guy who squares up. Maybe they're just looking at styles and saying, you know what, Frank Buglioni, even though he beat Hosea Burton, he's an easier style for Yarde than Hosea Burton, because boxing is chess, it ain't checkers. Maybe that's what they feel about Ricky Summers as well. Okay, Summers, an easier style to deal with than Hosea Burton. We got to pick the right fights at the right time for Anthony Yarde and be careful about who we match him with because he is so inexperienced. And that's fair enough. I'm just trying to decipher as an outsider looking in what exactly is going on both sides. On the Buglioni side and also on the Anthony Yarde side. One thing we know is Hosea Burton is easy, man. He's like, yo, I'll fight anybody. You want me to fight Anthony Yarde? Let's do it. So we ain't got to question Hosea Burton in this situation. He's more than ready to step in. Let me know what you feel in the comment section below, people, about this particular situation. It will be disappointing because the British Border Boxing Control are about to order purse bids for Frank Buglioni's next fight for the British title and also the Hosea Burton and the Yarde fight. We're about to order purse bids for both of them. It looks as though Team Yarde, Frank Warren, etc. are going to pull out of the purse bid. Certainly that's what Eddie Hearn believes is going to happen. It will be disappointing if that happens, especially if Yarde goes to then fight a Ricky Summers or somebody even not as good as Ricky Summers. That'll be disappointing because he'll be earning a lot less money. I mean, Ricky Summers is certainly a big step up from the guys he's been facing, like this Baranyi guy. Way better. Maybe Ricky Summers is a good enough step up. I don't know. I'm still undecided about the level of step up that Anthony Yarde needs. He certainly needs a big step up, but how big? You know, because I'm always pro fighter. I always want to see fighters make the most out of their ability and fulfill their potential. So I don't want to see Anthony Yarde thrown in over his head too early in his career. I don't want to see that. I want to see him brought along at the right pace and matched correctly to the point where he progresses and we eventually do see him fulfill his potential and make the most out of his ability. That's what I want to see. Hopefully I made sense there. So let me know how you feel in the comment section, people. It's happening. I'm out.